Welcome to a new episode of MP's Stories. This story will focus on research methods, especially qualitative research methods, and how they are written in the book, how we give instructions on how to conduct them, versus how does it look like when we go in the field and work especially in rural areas and in different parts of the world. I will focus the discussion on two types of qualitative research methods that are very common in how we collect information. One is interviews and one is focus groups. Interviews, as you see in the book, is about how to collect information based on a one-on-one discussion. You as a researcher and you have somebody you have interest in talking to them, and you sit together and you collect information from them based on your research objectives and research questions. Important when you do interviews is to make sure that the person you are interviewing is feeling safe, that they are assured of confidentiality, and that they will not be harmed by what they say. And therefore, it is strongly recommended in all the research books that when we do interviews, you got to find a space that is secure and just you and the other person, and no one can listen to what they're saying, so that they can feel safe when they speak. This is great. This is really very good values to consider and to respect when you conduct research. As you see in this picture, for me this picture is a perfect example of how an interview should look like. However, when you go into other parts of the world, other than, say, the professional settings, where you have an office and a desk like you saw in the picture, in some places where you go to do the interviews, in a village, in a rural area, far away, you may not have that kind of arrangement where you can have a desk and a room and the office, but you need to sit in the open air with someone to speak to them. And that happened to me often, and happened to many of the researchers who go to collect data, whether in peace and conflict resolution or in other social science research. So what do? You have to sit in open air with that person. And often what happened to me is I sit with a person, and I explain to them that this is confidential and that it's just you and me and so on. And they say, yes, sure, we keep talking. And as we start to talk, someone passing by from the community will just become curious to see me as an outsider sitting and talking to someone from their community. So they, out of curiosity, they kind of stand around or sit around and just listen. Like you see in this picture of this woman just sat down like this. And of course, that makes me feel awkward because now the rules, according to the book, are being violated. However, the person I'm interviewing seemed to be very comfortable and talking and opening up and is not worried about this person sitting. And the person sitting around seemed also not to be comfortable. I am the only one who's not comfortable. However, I realize that if I start to raise the issue and they say, can you please tell the person to leave, I may be causing more damage. Remember, do no harm. I don't want to do harm by doing my research. I may cause suspicion, actually, if I tell the person I'm interviewing, can you tell this person to leave? Number one, I don't know what kind of insult this will be. Second, I wonder if it will raise suspicion about why do you want to just talk to him and not to have the community listening. Isn't this also about transparency and to people to know what we are being said? I mean, it's a valid point to consider. And then what happens eventually is that not only will this one person comes to the sitting, but eventually 2 more people come, 3 more people, 4, 5. Before you know it, it looks like the picture you see now. 5, 6 people sitting, and not only sitting and listening, eventually they start to engage and they start to talk and answer my questions. Before I know it, I am doing group interview, not an individual interview. And I always wondered, is this okay? And I found that actually, in terms of information I'm collecting, it seems that the information is good. It's not like I'm losing anything or missing anything, but it is not fitting with what is written in the book about how to do individual interview with confidentiality and all the important things that we want to protect against. But then that's a dilemma. What do I do? Do I have to make sure to stick to the book? In this case, I will not be able to collect my information, or to adjust my method and accept that what I call individual interview will become a group interview. And I just want to make sure I get as much of this information as I can. And actually, I resigned to accepting that I will just do it as group interview. If this is the case, I'm not going to push against it. And I will write in my report that this is how we collected the data and this is what happened. And when I shared that with other colleagues, I found that almost everyone who works in similar context, they face situations of this type. And that just becomes clear to us that what we read in the books are great, is great, we should be inspired by, and we try to follow it. But when we need to adjust, we got to make the adjustment if that's what will work in the context we are dealing with. The other story is about focus groups. And I also equally found that focus groups, usually when you read in the books, one of the important instructions is when you set up the group, make sure to put them in a circle or in a way that everyone sees everyone and that everyone is equal. Those are important, good values to consider. You want to make sure people are feeling equal. You want to make sure that they see each other. You want to make sure that they understand the body language and the eye contact that's happening between them, in addition to what they say. And all this enriches the discussion and makes the focus group useful. And that's what we try to do wherever we go to conduct focus groups. However, again, you go in some cultures and you realize that actually people are not comfortable sitting in a circle, especially when there is a gender element or age element involved. I remember one time we were doing that research in Egypt about 10, 12 years ago. And in that research, we were conducting focus groups in cities and in rural areas. And I trained my team that they would bring people, put them in a circle, and we did exercises on this. Everything was fine. They had no problem doing the circle concept in the cities. But when they went to some villages, and we informed people in the village that we are coming to do the focus group, we wanted a mix of men, women, and young men as well to be present. And they welcomed very much, and they were very excited that we were coming to do the research in their village. However, when the researchers arrived, they found that they were already sitting in the meeting room, and they had sat in a way that the leaders of the community, who are typically men, were sitting in the front, followed by the young men, followed by the women. The researchers quickly thought about it, and they realized that if they ask him, can you please move around and sit in a circle, this will create a lot of confusion and misunderstanding and make people upset because they are not used to this kind of sitting in terms of gender and age dynamics. And therefore, they decided to leave them sitting the way they are, and they collected excellent information. It's not that because of the women and the young men were sitting in the back that they didn't speak. No, actually, they spoke very well. And this picture I share here from Sudan, where we did this research about a year ago, is a good illustration of how women sitting in this setup, they were comfortable to speak because that's the setup they are familiar with. And it gives them more space to speak. Rather than if I put them in a circle, they probably would have felt so uncomfortable and wouldn't be able to come up and speak. Plus, whatever misunderstanding you may create because of insisting on the circle. And that made us realize that when we do focus groups also, just like with interviews, we got to be careful about what is important in some contexts. And what is important to me as a researcher is what's important for me is to put people in circle or to lock them in one room, just one-on-one, or is it the information I will gather? And that the information is reflective of what people are thinking and honest and is useful for my research objectives. If the latter, then we need to adjust when we have to. And what is written in the book, we need to be inspired by the main values and ethics, but adjust how we're going to implement it on the ground to fit for what is appropriate for different cultures and different societies. In this way, we make sure that our research is enriching people and is not causing harm or damage, and instead it is achieving our objectives and what we want to accomplish. I hope you found those stories useful, and until more stories, in peace. Amen.